I stood in the doorway of our small kitchen, my hand gripping the edge of the counter as I watched Nicholas sprawled out on the couch. The TV bled some mindless show, the flickering light casting shadows on the walls. I could feel the tension building in my shoulders, a dull ache that had been growing for weeks, months even. Nicholas had been laid off 6 months ago, and while I initially sympathized with his situation, that sympathy had long since turned into frustration. At first, he had promised that it was just temporary, that he needed a little time to get his head right. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. But now, as I stood there, the dishes piled high in the sink, the laundry basket overflowing in the corner, I could no longer ignore the reality. Nothing had changed. If anything, things had gotten worse. "Nicholas," I called out, my voice sharper than I intended. He barely glanced in my direction, his eyes glazed over from hours of staring at the screen. "Yeah," he muttered, not bothering to mute the TV. "Can you please help with the dishes?" "They're starting to smell," I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice, but failing miserably. Nicholas sighed, a sound that grated on my already frayed nerves. "I'll get to it later, Zara. I'm just really tired right now." "Tired?" I repeated, incredulous. "Nicholas, all you've done today is sit on that couch. I'm the one who's been at work all day, and now I come home to a mess that I have to clean up. I'm exhausted." He finally turned to look at me, his expression annoyed. I said I'll do it later. "Why are you always nagging me?" "Nagging you?" The words came out before I could stop them, my voice rising in pitch. "Do you even hear yourself, Nick? I'm asking you to help out around the house because I'm drowning here. I can't keep doing everything by myself." He rolled his eyes, a gesture that made my blood boil. "You're overreacting. It's just some dishes, Zara. I'll take care of it." "When?" I snapped, unable to hold back the anger any longer. "When will you take care of it, Nicholas? Tomorrow? Next week? Never? Because that's what it feels like you're just waiting for me to do it so you don't have to." Nicholas sat up on the couch, his expression shifting from annoyance to something harder, more defensive. "You act like I'm doing nothing on purpose, like I enjoy being out of work. It's not that easy, Zara. You don't understand what it's like." "You're right," I said, my voice trembling with the effort to keep from shouting. "I don't understand what it's like to lose a job. But I do understand what it's like to have to pick up the slack when your partner checks out. And I'm telling you, Nick, I can't keep doing this. Something has to change." He stared at me, his jaw set stubbornly. "So what do you want me to do, huh? Go out and get a job just like that? It's not that simple." "I know it's not simple," I shot back. "But you're not even trying, Nicholas. You're not looking for jobs. You're not helping around the house. You're not doing anything. And it's killing me." There was a long, painful silence between us, the kind that made the air feel thick and heavy. Nicholas looked away, avoiding my gaze, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of the couch cushion. I could see the tension in his posture, the way his shoulders were hunched up around his ears, but I didn't care. I was too angry, too tired to care. "Zara," he said finally, his voice low, almost pleading, "I just need more time. I'm trying to figure things out, but it's hard, okay? You don't get it." "I do get it," I said quietly, my anger suddenly giving way to a deep, aching sadness. "But you're not the only one who's struggling, Nick. I'm struggling too, and I need you. I need you to meet me halfway." He didn't say anything, and the silence that followed felt like a wall between us, impenetrable and cold. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, but I quickly brushed it away, refusing to let him see how much this was hurting me. "Do you even care anymore?" I whispered, more to myself than to him. "What?" Nicholas asked, finally turning to look at me, confusion and guilt flickering in his eyes. "Do you care?" I repeated, louder this time. "About us? About this marriage? Because it feels like you've given up, and I'm the only one fighting to keep it together." "Of course I care," he said, his voice defensive. I don't know what to do, Zara. I feel so lost." "Then tell me that," I said, my voice breaking. "Talk to me, Nick, but don't just sit there and let everything fall apart." Nicholas stared at me, his expression softening, but he still didn't move. He didn't come to me, didn't offer any comfort, any reassurance. He just sat there, looking lost and defeated, and it broke my heart. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Something has to change, Nicholas. Please. He nodded slowly, but his eyes had already drifted back to the TV, as if the conversation had drained him of whatever resolve he might have had. I stood there for a moment longer, waiting for something, an apology, a promise, anything, but it never came. Finally, I turned and walked away, the weight of my disappointment settling heavily on my shoulders. I didn't know what else to do. I had tried talking, pleading, reasoning, but nothing seemed to get through to him. I was reaching my breaking point, and I didn't know how much more I could take. As I lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between us. It was as if a wall had been erected, one that neither of us knew how to tear down. And I was terrified that, if things didn't change soon, it would be the end of us. The following morning, I woke up with a plan. It wasn't something I had thought through entirely, but desperation does strange things to a person. As I stared at the ceiling, my mind still replaying the argument from the night before, I realized that nothing was going to change unless I did something drastic. Nicholas needed a wake-up call, and I was determined to give him one. If he wasn't going to take the initiative to turn his life around, then maybe a little push, or in this case, a shove, would do the trick. I decided I would pretend to lose my job. It was a risky move, and it went against everything I believed in, but I was at my wits' end. If Nicholas thought that we were both out of work, maybe he would finally feel the urgency to do something, to step up and help out. Maybe he finally realized that he couldn't just coast through life while I carried the weight of our world on my shoulders. I rehearsed the conversation in my head as I got ready for work, practicing my tone, the words I would use, the expressions I would need to pull this off. It felt deceitful, but I convinced myself that it was a necessary evil. After all, hadn't I tried everything else? What other options did I have? As I headed out the door, I caught a glimpse of Nicholas still asleep on the couch, his mouth slightly open, snoring softly. A pang of guilt shot through me, but I quickly pushed it aside. This wasn't about punishing him. It was about saving our marriage, saving us. The day at work dragged on longer than usual, every minute bringing me closer to the moment when I would have to carry out my plan. By the time I pulled into our driveway, my heart was pounding in my chest, and my hands were clammy with nerves. I wasn't a good liar, at least I didn't think I was. But today, I needed to be. I took a deep breath and opened the front door. Nicholas was sitting at the kitchen table, a bowl of cereal in front of him, staring absent-mindedly at his phone. He looked up when I walked in, giving me a small smile. "Hey," he said, his voice unusually bright. "How was work?" "Here it goes," I thought, steeling myself. I dropped my bag on the floor and let out a long, exaggerated sigh, hoping to convey the right mix of exhaustion and despair. "Nick," I began, my voice trembling just enough to sound convincing, I need to talk to you about something." His smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. "What's wrong?" I hesitated for a moment, playing with the strap of my bag, before forcing the words out. I lost my job today." The silence that followed was deafening. Nicholas just stared at me, his eyes wide with shock. For a second, I wondered if he could see right through me, if he knew I was lying. But then his expression softened, and he set his phone down, reaching out for my hand. "Oh, Zara, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice filled with genuine sympathy. "What happened?" I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "They said it was downsizing, budget cuts." "I don't know, I didn't see it coming. One minute I was working on a report, and the next, my boss called me into his office, and that was it. I was out the door." Nicholas squeezed my hand, his thumb rubbing soothing circles over my knuckles. "That's awful, Zara. I can't believe they'd do that to you. You've been working so hard." "Yeah," I murmured, lowering my gaze to hide the guilt that was starting to eat away at me. It's really scary, Nick. I don't know what we're going to do. We can't both be out of work." As the words left my mouth, I hoped they would have the desired effect, that they would light a fire under him. But when I looked up, all I saw in his eyes was worry and confusion. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice wavering slightly. "I'll start looking for something more seriously. Maybe there's something part-time I can do, while I look for a full-time gig. And we can cut back on expenses. We'll make it work, Zara." His words were more comforting than I had expected, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was working. Maybe this was what Nicholas needed to snap out of his rut. But then, as he continued to speak, my hope began to waver. I mean, we've got some savings, right? We can dip into that until we get back on our feet. And maybe we could look into some unemployment benefits for you? That would help us stay afloat for a while. I clenched my jaw, trying not to let my frustration show. Savings? Unemployment benefits. These were temporary solutions, not the long-term change I was hoping for. Nicholas wasn't talking about finding a real job, about pulling his weight around the house. He was just trying to coast by, just as he had been for months. Nicholas, I said, forcing myself to sound calm, we can't just rely on savings or benefits. We need a plan, a real plan. We need to work together to figure out how to get through this. He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes, the hesitation. Of course, Zara. I'll start looking right away. I'll send out some resumes tonight. Not tonight, I said, a bit too sharply. I took a deep breath, trying to soften my tone. I mean, yes, send out resumes, but we need to start making changes now. We need to cut back on spending, start doing things ourselves instead of hiring people. We can't afford to be lazy about this. And lazy? Nicholas stammered, clearly taken aback. I pressed on, determined to make him understand. Yes, lazy. We've been spending too much on things we can do ourselves. House repairs, gardening, even takeout. We need to tighten our belts and start being more proactive. Nicholas shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his gaze dropping to the table. I didn't realize you felt that way. I don't want to put all the pressure on you, Nick, I continued, trying to sound more supportive. But we're in this together, and I need you to step up. We both need to. He nodded slowly, but his response was lukewarm at best. I'll try, Zara. I really will. Trying isn't enough, I said, surprising even myself with the firmness in my voice. We need to do this, Nick. We don't have a choice. The conversation ended on a somber note, with Nicholas promising to do better, to try harder. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the darkened ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I had taken a huge risk by lying to him, but instead of bringing us closer, it seemed to be driving a deeper wedge between us. I wanted to believe that Nicholas would follow through on his promises, that he would take this as the wake-up call it was meant to be. But deep down, I knew that it wasn't going to be that simple. Pretending to lose my job might have been a clever ruse, but it couldn't change the underlying issues in our marriage. The next few days were tense, with Nicholas making small efforts to help around the house and browsing job listings online, but the progress was minimal. I watched him with a mixture of hope and disappointment, wanting so badly for him to take the initiative, but knowing that the change I sought couldn't be forced. The lie had been told, and now I had to live with it. The question was, would Nicholas rise to the challenge, or had I just made things worse? The days following my pretend layoff were a mix of quiet tension and mounting frustration. Nicholas had made some small efforts. He picked up groceries once, cleaned the bathroom after I pointed out that it hadn't been done in weeks, and sent out a few job applications. But the spark of motivation I'd hoped to ignite seemed to flicker and fade. His initial burst of activity was quickly replaced by his usual lethargy, and I found myself doing most of the housework and worrying about our future. One evening, after another long day at work, I returned home to find Nicholas once again on the couch, engrossed in a video game. A few dirty dishes sat on the coffee table, and the laundry I had asked him to fold that morning was still in the basket, untouched. I felt the familiar surge of irritation rise within me, but this time, I'd forced myself to take a deep breath and calm down. I had another idea, a different approach that might finally get through to him. Over dinner that night, a hastily made pasta dish that Nicholas ate without much enthusiasm, I casually brought up the idea that had been forming in my mind all day. You know, Nick, I began, swirling my fork in my pasta, since I'm out of work, I've been thinking about ways we can save money. We can't just rely on our savings forever. He nodded absent-mindedly, his attention more on his phone than on our conversation. Yeah, you're right, we should be careful. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Exactly. So I was thinking maybe we could start doing some of the household repairs ourselves instead of hiring people. It would save us a lot, and besides, it could be fun to learn something new together. Nicholas looked up from his phone, a hint of skepticism in his eyes. Household repairs? Like what? Well, I said, trying to sound enthusiastic, there's that leaky faucet in the bathroom that's been driving me crazy. And the garden, it's overgrown and needs some serious attention. We could tackle these projects together. It would be a good way to spend time and save money. He hesitated, his brow furrowing as he considered my suggestion. I don't know, Zara. I'm not exactly handy with tools, and I've never been much of a gardener. Neither have I admitted, but we could learn. We could watch tutorials online or even ask one of your friends who's good with this stuff to help out. And it's not just about the repairs. We could do things like cooking more at home instead of ordering takeout all the time. It would help stretch our budget, especially since we're both not working now. Nicholas sighed, setting his phone down on the table. I guess that makes sense, but honestly, I'm not sure I have the energy for it. Things have been really stressful lately, and I don't know if I'm up for it. I felt a pang of disappointment but quickly masked it with a reassuring smile. I understand, Nick, but maybe doing something productive would help us feel more in control. I mean, we can't change what happened with our jobs, but we can control how we manage things at home. He nodded slowly, though he still seemed unsure. Okay, I'll give it a shot, but no promises that I won't mess something up. I laughed lightly, trying to keep the mood upbeat. That's the spirit. It doesn't have to be perfect. We'll just do our best. And who knows, maybe we'll surprise ourselves. That weekend, I set my plan into motion. We started with the leaky faucet in the bathroom, a relatively small task, but one that had been nagging at me for weeks. I had already watched a few instructional videos and even bought the necessary tools, hoping that having everything ready would make it easier for Nicholas to get on board. As we worked together on the faucet, I found myself taking the lead, guiding Nicholas through each step. He fumbled with the wrench at first, his movements awkward and unsure, but after a while, he seemed to relax into the task. There were a few moments of frustration, mostly from him, but I made sure to keep things light, cracking jokes and encouraging him whenever he did something right. At one point, as he struggled to loosen a stubborn bolt, he looked up at me with a sheepish grin. You sure you didn't miss your calling as a plumber, Zara? I laughed, wiping a smudge of grease from his cheek. Maybe I did, but I'd much rather be a plumber with you by my side. He chuckled, the sound warm and genuine, and for a moment I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this plan would work after all. Maybe, by tackling these small projects together, Nicholas would start to feel more capable, more involved, and more responsible for our home and future. When we finally fixed the faucet, Nicholas let out a triumphant cheer. There, I can't believe we actually did it. See? We make a pretty good team, I said, smiling at him as I tested the faucet, watching the water flow without a single drip. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. Yeah, we do, he agreed, wiping his hands on a rag. This wasn't so bad. I guess I just needed to get out of my own head for a bit. I seized the moment. Exactly. And that's why I think we should keep going. There's so much we can do around the house, things we've been putting off for months. And it's not just about saving money, it's about taking pride in our home, in what we're building together. Nicholas nodded, though the enthusiasm in his eyes dimmed slightly. Yeah, I guess you're right. But Zara, you know this isn't a long-term solution. We need real jobs, real income. We can't fix everything with duct tape and elbow grease. I bit my lip, knowing he was right, but unwilling to give up on my plan just yet. I know, Nick, but right now, this is what we can do. And I think it's helping, don't you? He shrugged, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Yeah, it's helping. I don't want you to think I'm okay with how things are. I want to do better, Zara, but it's hard. Sometimes it feels like I'm stuck in quicksand, and every time I try to move, I just sink deeper. His words hit me harder than I expected, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I had been so focused on getting him to change that I hadn't stopped to consider how he was really feeling, how deep his struggles went. I'm sorry, Nick, I said softly, reaching out to touch his arm. I didn't realize. I just wanted to help to get us through this. But you're right. We can't just fix the surface issues. We need to find a way out of this together. He looked at me, his expression a mix of gratitude and sadness. I appreciate everything you're doing, Zara. I really do. And I promise I'll keep trying. but I think we need to face the fact that this is bigger than just doing chores or fixing things around the house. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. You're right, we do need to face it. But I'm not giving up on us, Nick. We'll figure this out. We have to. He squeezed my hand, his grip warm and reassuring. We will. I just need some time to get my head straight, to figure out what's next. I don't want to drag you down with me. You're not dragging me down, I insisted, my voice firm. We're in this together, and we'll get through it together. Nicholas smiled, a genuine smile that made me feel like, for the first time in months, we were finally on the same page. Okay, he said, nodding. Together. The rest of the weekend passed in a blur of small projects and tentative conversations about the future. We tackled the overgrown garden next, working side by side to pull weeds, trim hedges, and plant new flowers. Nicholas seemed to enjoy being outside, his mood lifting with each completed task, and I found myself enjoying his company more than I had in months. But beneath the surface, I knew that our problems were far from solved. The crafty plan had been a temporary fix, a way to get us moving again, but it wasn't enough. Nicholas still needed to find direction, to regain his sense of purpose, and I couldn't do that for him. As we sat on the porch that evening, admiring our handiwork, I turned to Nicholas, my heart heavy with the weight of what I needed to say. Nick, I began, I know we've been through a lot lately, and I'm proud of the progress we've made this weekend. But we can't keep going like this. We need to figure out what comes next, how to get back on our feet. He looked at me, his eyes thoughtful. You're right, Zara. I've been putting it off, but I think it's time to start looking for a real job again. I can't keep hiding behind these small projects, even if they've been good for us. I smiled, relieved to hear him say it. I'm glad you feel that way. And I'll be here to support you, every step of the way. Thank you, he said, his voice sincere. I know I haven't been the easiest person to live with lately, but I want to change that, for you, for us. We'll get there, I promised, squeezing his hand, one step at a time. As we sat there, the evening breeze carrying the scent of fresh flowers, I realized that while the crafty plan had been a step in the right direction, it was only the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, in finding a way to rebuild our lives and our relationship. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful that we could do it together. Despite our recent progress, the cracks in our relationship began to reappear, deeper than before. The small victories we'd achieved through our shared projects around the house weren't enough to mask the underlying tension between us. Nicholas's initial enthusiasm for fixing things and cutting back on expenses waned as the days turned into weeks. I noticed the familiar signs creeping back, his disinterest, his procrastination, the same lethargy that had driven me to concoct my crafty plan in the first place. One evening, I came home from work to find the house in disarray. The laundry I had asked Nicholas to fold earlier in the week was still in a crumpled heap on the couch. Dirty dishes were piled up in the sink, and the trash can was overflowing. The frustration I had been trying to suppress all day came boiling to the surface. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but it was no use. This was the last straw. I found Nicholas in the living room, lounging on the couch with his feet up, a bag of chips in one hand and the TV remote in the other. He looked up when I entered, his expression nonchalant, as if nothing was wrong. Hey Zara, he said, his tone casual. How was work? I stared at him, unable to believe how oblivious he seemed to everything around him. Work was fine, I replied, my voice clipped. But what about here? Nicholas, the house is a mess. I asked you to take care of a few things, and it looks like you haven't done anything. He sighed, his shoulders slumping as he set the remote down. I was going to get to it, Zara. I just needed a break. It's been a long day. A long day, I repeated, incredulous. Nick, I've been working all day, and I come home to this? It's like you don't even care. I do care, he said, sounding defensive. But you're acting like I'm the only one who lives here. I've been looking for jobs all day, and it's exhausting. I needed some time to relax. Relax? I echoed, my voice rising. Nick, this isn't about relaxing. It's about pulling your weight around here. I'm working full-time, and I still find time to take care of the house. What's your excuse? He glared at me, his frustration bubbling to the surface. You think I'm not trying, Zara? I've been applying to jobs non-stop, but it's not that easy. You're acting like I'm just sitting around doing nothing, but that's not true. Really? I shut back, my anger spilling over. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've given up. I've tried everything to motivate you, to help you, but nothing seems to work. What am I supposed to do, Nick? Carry this entire load on my own? Maybe you should stop acting like you're the only one who's struggling. Nicholas snapped, standing up to face me. I'm doing the best I can, but you're always on my case, always expecting more. I'm tired, Zara. I'm tired of feeling like a failure. His words cut through me like a knife, and for a moment, I was speechless. This wasn't how I had imagined this conversation going. I wasn't trying to make him feel like a failure. I just wanted him to step up, to take responsibility. I'm not trying to make you feel like a failure, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. I just want you to realize that we can't keep living like this. We're supposed to be a team, but it feels like I'm the only one putting in the effort. I know I've been struggling, Nicholas admitted, his tone softening slightly. But it's hard, Zara. Every day feels like a battle just to get out of bed. I've been trying to push through it, but sometimes I just don't have the energy. I understand that, Nick, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But we can't keep using that as an excuse. We have to find a way forward together. I can't do this alone. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and desperation. I don't want to lose you, Zara. I know I've been letting you down, but I'm scared. I'm scared that I won't find a job, that I won't be able to provide for us. And the more scared I get, the more I just shut down. His admission took me by surprise, and for a moment, my anger gave way to a deep sadness. I could see how lost he was, how much he was struggling with his own fears and insecurities. But even as I empathized with him, I couldn't ignore the fact that his inaction was dragging us both down. I'm scared too, I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. But we can't let that fear paralyze us. We need to act, Nick. We need to start making real changes, or we're going to lose everything. He nodded, though his expression remained troubled. I know, Zara. I don't know where to start. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. We start by taking responsibility, by facing this head-on instead of avoiding it. I need you to commit, Nick. I need you to show me that you're willing to fight for us, for our future. Nicholas looked down, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a long moment he was silent, and I could see the internal struggle written all over his face. Finally, he looked up at me, his eyes filled with determination. I'll do better, he said, his voice firm. I don't want to lose you, Zara. I'll start taking things more seriously. I'll look for a job every day, and I'll start helping out more around the house. I promise. I wanted to believe him, to take his words at face value and trust that this time things would be different. But I couldn't shake the doubt that had taken root deep inside me. We had been through this cycle before, promises made and then quietly broken, hope kindled only to be snuffed out by the reality of our situation. I hope you mean that, Nick, I replied, my voice tinged with both hope and wariness. Because I can't keep going like this. If things don't change, I don't know what will happen to us. Nicholas's face fell, and for a moment I saw a flash of panic in his eyes. You're not saying you want to leave me, are you? I hesitated, not wanting to hurt him, but also needing to be honest. I don't want to, but I need to think about what's best for both of us. I need to see real change, Nick, not just promises, action. He nodded slowly, the weight of my words sinking in. I understand, and I'll show you that I'm serious this time. I don't want to lose you, Zara. I'll do whatever it takes. I looked at him, searching for any sign that this time might be different, that he truly meant what he was saying. His expression was earnest, but I could still see the uncertainty lurking beneath the surface. I knew he wanted to change, but I wasn't sure if he could. Okay, I said finally, my voice softening. Let's take it one day at a time. But please, Nick, don't let me down again. I won't, he promised, taking my hand in his. I'm going to do better for both of us. We stood there for a moment, the tension between us easing slightly but not disappearing entirely. I could feel the fragility of our situation, like a delicate thread that could snap at any moment. But for now, I was willing to give him another chance, to see if he could follow through on his promises. The next few days were a cautious dance of tentative optimism and lingering doubt. Nicholas made a visible effort to change. He woke up earlier, applied to jobs more diligently, and even started helping around the house without me having to ask. He seemed more engaged, more present, and I started to feel a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, things were turning around. But that flicker was accompanied by a nagging fear that it wouldn't last, that we would slip back into the same patterns that had brought us to the brink. I tried to push those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the progress we were making and the promise of better days ahead. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, Nicholas turned to me with a look of determination in his eyes. "Zara, I've been thinking. Maybe I need to take a different approach to finding work. I've been applying to the same kinds of jobs I had before, but maybe I need to broaden my search, try something new." I was surprised by his words, but also encouraged. "That sounds like a good idea, Nick. What were you thinking of?" He shrugged, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know yet. Maybe something in a different field, or maybe I could go back to school and get some new skills. I just know that what I've been doing isn't working, and I need to change that." "I think that's a great idea," I said, feeling a surge of hope. "It might be just what you need to get back on track." He nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah, I think so too. I'm going to start looking into it tomorrow." As I watched him, I felt a renewed sense of hope, tempered by the hard lessons of the past. I wanted to believe that this time would be different, that Nicholas had finally reached a turning point. But only time would tell if this new resolve would lead to real change, or if it was just another temporary reprieve in a long, exhausting cycle. For now, all I could do was support him and hope that we were finally on the path to a better future together. The days that followed were a strange mixture of anticipation and trepidation. Nicholas seemed more committed than I had seen him in months. He spent hours each day researching different career paths, attending online workshops, and even reaching out to old contacts for advice. The transformation was gradual but unmistakable. It was as if a part of him that had been dormant was slowly waking up. Still, I couldn't shake the fear that this might be another fleeting effort, a temporary burst of energy that would fade as quickly as it had appeared. I kept reminding myself to take it one day at a time, to appreciate the small victories while preparing myself for any setbacks. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, I came home to find the house spotless. The dishes were done, the laundry was folded, and the living room was free of clutter. Nicholas was in the kitchen, humming to himself as he prepared dinner. The sight of him, so content and productive, brought a smile to my face. "Wow," I said, leaning against the doorway. "This place looks amazing. You've been busy." Nicholas turned to me, a proud grin on his face. "I figured it was the least I could do. You've been working so hard, and I wanted to make sure you could come home and relax for a change." I walked over to him, wrapping my arms around his waist. "Thank you, Nick. This means a lot to me." He hugged me back, his embrace warm and comforting. "I'm just trying to do my part. I know I've let you down before, but I'm really trying, Zara. I want to make things right." "I can see that," I said, looking up at him. "And I appreciate it more than you know. It feels like we're finally moving forward." He nodded, his expression serious. "I think we are. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realized that I need to stop letting fear control me. It's not going to be easy, but I'm ready to face whatever comes next." I smiled, feeling a mixture of relief and hope. "I'm glad to hear that. And whatever happens, we'll face it together." The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Nicholas threw himself into his new career search with a determination I hadn't seen in him before. He explored different industries, attended networking events, and even started taking a few online courses to build new skills. His days were full, and for the first time in a long time, he seemed genuinely excited about the future. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch after dinner, Nicholas turned to me with a thoughtful look on his face. "Zara, I've been thinking," he began, his tone hesitant. "I've been really enjoying the online courses I've been taking. I think I want to go back to school, maybe get a degree in something completely new." I was taken aback, but also intrigued. "Really? What are you thinking of studying?" "I'm not sure yet," he admitted, "but I've been really interested in psychology lately. I think I'd like to explore that more, maybe even pursue a career in counseling or social work." That's a big change, I said, surprised but impressed by his newfound direction. But it sounds like something you'd be really good at. You've always been great at listening and helping people. He smiled, a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. I think so too. It's a little scary though. Going back to school at this age, starting over in a new field, it's a lot to think about. I know it's a big decision, I said, taking his hand in mine. But if it's something you're passionate about, it's worth pursuing. And you're not starting over, Nick. You're building on everything you've already learned and experienced. He nodded, his grip on my hand tightening. I think you're right. I spent so much time being afraid of change, but now I'm realizing that change might be exactly what I need. I want to do something meaningful, something that makes a difference. I smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride in him. I think that's amazing, Nick. And whatever you decide, I'll be here to support you. Thank you, Zara, he said, his voice filled with gratitude. I couldn't have gotten through this without you. You don't have to thank me, I replied, squeezing his hand. We've both been through a lot, but we're stronger for it, and now we're finally moving towards something better. The weeks turned into months, and Nicholas's plan began to take shape. He applied to a local university, was accepted into their psychology program, and started taking classes part-time while continuing his job search. The change in him was remarkable. He was more motivated, more focused, and more engaged with life than I had seen him in years. Our relationship, too, began to heal. The resentment and frustration that had built up between us started to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of partnership. We communicated more openly, supporting each other through the ups and downs of our respective journeys. The tension that had once filled our home was replaced by a sense of calm and optimism. One evening, after Nicholas had finished studying for the night, we sat together on the porch, sipping tea and enjoying the cool evening breeze. The garden we had once neglected was now thriving, a testament to the effort we had put into rebuilding our lives. I was thinking about something today, Nicholas said, breaking the comfortable silence. What's that? I asked, curious. I was thinking about how far we've come, he replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. A few months ago, I couldn't even imagine being where I am now. But here we are, starting fresh, building something new. I smiled, feeling a deep sense of contentment. We've come a long way, haven't we? It hasn't been easy, but I think we're stronger for it. He turned to me, his expression soft and full of affection. I couldn't have done it without you, Zara. You were the one who kept us going when I was ready to give up. I think we both kept each other going, I said, leaning into him. We made it through because we didn't give up on each other. He wrapped his arm around me, pulling me close. I'm so grateful for that. And for you. I know I've said it before, but I'm really going to make this work. For us, for our future. I believe you, Nick, I said, my voice filled with conviction. And I'm excited to see where this new beginning takes us. As we sat there together, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the night sky, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I knew that whatever challenges we faced, we would face them together. This was the new beginning we had been searching for, a chance to rebuild our lives, our relationship, and our future. And this time, I was confident that we would succeed.